Coming up on Fresh Dew with Pastor Nkechi.
What is the way out of this problem in our nation? What is the way out of this problem in your country? What is the way out of the problem in Europe and different places where there are economic situations going on? We just need more money. If we could just have more money. Have you heard people who want to start businesses say, my problem is just capital. If I can just get money. Listen to me, child of God. In the time of famine, money fails you.
Nigeria, and I am satisfied with my Redeeming mother tongue. Our home delicacies are second to none. Tuwo shinkafa, epa nkukwo, isiewu and nkwobi, amala and ewedu. Send me anywhere. My satisfaction is never complete till I return to my motherland.
I am Nigeria and I am courageous. I survived the odds of the environment. I walked through the narrow path, striving for the best, aiming at my dreams. I come out with knowledge, gifts, and skills that beat the minds of the onlookers.
I am Nigerian and I am brave. Squeeze me, squash me, turn me upside down, turn me inside out. Greatness is what you get. I'm a survivor, a warrior. Victorious! In my presence, the deadly Ebola virus melted. Yes, melted like wax before fire. Even when they refused to assist us with your perceived solution, God has made me the giant of Africa. I am standing and will still stand. I am running and I will not faint. And I will soar against the wind.
I am Nigeria and I have values. I understand the covenant of marriage. I understand the authority of parents. I understand the essence of decency. I'm beautiful on the inside and it reflects outside. I understand the place of the supreme being. I know my God and my God knows me.
I am Nigeria and I am proud. I have no apologies. I walk with my shoulders high. 250 ethnic groups, 182 million strong, the most populous black nation in existence. I am proud of my culture, expressed in all the dances and the festivals that are bursting in resplendent colors. My inner beauty, my inner intelligence is expressed in the achievements of my artists and my intellectuals. A wealthy heritage and a healthy people.
And in beautiful harmony, we wield our strength, courage, dignity, and unity. We are Nigerians.
We are Nigeria.
We are Nigeria. We are Nigeria.
Hello and welcome to this very special episode of Fresh Dew. It's always my pleasure to welcome you to Fresh Dew, and my name is Pastor Nkechi. Now, our message series continues, and that is the message, Activating Abundance in the Time of Famine. And this is part 2 of that message series, Activating Abundance in the Time of Famine. We said last week that we're pretty much safe to say that our country, Nigeria, and indeed a lot of countries in the world today face famine or an imminent threat of famine. And we need to understand what famine is all about and then begin to understand as children of God how we can activate abundance in the time of famine. So famine is extreme, general scarcity of food, shortage, scarcity of anything, hunger, lack, as making to stoop with emptiness and pains. When you look at the price of oil, when you look at the scarcity of food, when you look at the exchange rate and the difference between the CBN rate and the black market rate, you can really say that this is a bad situation economically. But what do we do as children of God, and what are we expected to do as children of God? So famine is a terrible time of devastation, despair, depression, and all kinds of stimuli come towards you as a child of God. How do you respond to these stimuli? Well, first of all, you need to identify them. And that's why we said that in this message series, we're going to be looking at it in two parts. Activating abundance in the time of famine. We're going to start by looking at in the time of famine. What are the things that happen? What are the things that you see? What are the characteristics that you find around you? The stimuli that pressure you as a child of God in the time of famine. And once we're done with that, then we'll go to the other part, which is how do you activate abundance, plenty, wealth in the time of famine. So in the time of famine, we said last week 3 things. We said in the time of famine, enemies are easily made and men fight each other's progress. We said in the time of famine, leaders are helpless. They don't know what to do. We also said in the time of famine, there is fear, insecurity, and an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. And we looked at, several stories, and we're going to keep doing this, looking at several stories of famine situations in the scriptures and bringing out these truths about these stimuli that hit you as a child of God in the time of famine. So we've looked at the first 3. Now let's look at 1 Kings 17, verse 8 to 12. 1 Kings 17, verse 8 to 12. Then the word of the Lord came to him, to Elijah, after he had declared famine in verse 1, saying, Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. See, I have commanded, note that, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, indeed, a widow was there gathering sticks, and he called to her and said, Please, bring me a little water in a cup that I may drink. And as she was going to get it, he called to her and said, Please, bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. So she said, As the Lord your God lives, I do not have bread, only a handful of flour in a bin and a little oil in a jar. And see, I am gathering a couple of sticks that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. Number 4, in the time of famine, it is easy to turn a deaf ear to the voice of God. I want to say it again. In the time of famine, child of God, it becomes very easy to turn a deaf ear to the voice of God. So the issue is not whether you heard the voice of God. The issue is not whether you heard the instruction from God. That's why I kept repeating that expression. See, I have commanded. If God said he had commanded the widow woman, God cannot lie. So if he says he had commanded the widow woman, it means he told the widow woman and she heard him. She heard him. I have commanded the widow woman. And that's what the scripture said. Indeed, she was there, just as God said. But she turned a deaf ear to what God asked her to do. She says, look, I don't have bread. I can go get you, a little of this, but now you're taking it too far. I don't have bread. I can't give this to you. These are the plans I have for myself and my son. Child of God, how many times in the time of famine, in the pressure of your needs, in the pressure of the lack all around, in the pressure of the shortage and the scarcity, have you turned a deaf ear to the voice of God? And the sad thing about this is many times we don't just turn a deaf ear to the voice of God, but then we begin to turn our ears to the voice of strangers. And that's why you find a lot of believers in the time of famine. They are prone to quick fix situations. And you have so-called churches and prayer houses thriving at a time like this. People come and they tell you, if you do this and you bring this item, or you bring this article, you bring this sand, or you bring this paper, you bring this oil, or you bring this water, there's always something you have to bring, or you bring your shoe and I will bless your shoe, and your shoe will, you will walk in those shoes into your next job, and all kinds of witchcraft and magic most of the time. You begin to fall prey to hirelings. You begin to fall prey to people who simply do not have the Spirit of God, because you've turned a deaf ear to the voice of God, and because of the famine and the needs and the stimuli you're getting, You just simply can hear the voice of strangers and you begin to follow them. But that was not what Jesus said about his sheep. Jesus spoke with confidence in John chapter 10. And I want to read those verses. And if you're born again, I want you to listen to the confidence with which Jesus speaks about you. These props and these tricks and these quick fix situations don't solve the famine situation. There is a way, which we're going to discover, to activate abundance in the time of famine. But you can't do that if you turn a deaf ear to the voice of God. If the Lord does not help you, like the other story we read last week said, who is going to help you? If you don't listen to the voice of God. And this woman was commanded by God. There were many widows in Zarephath. Have you thought about the fact that she was the one favored? Look at that, favored in the time of famine to be spoken to by God to provide for the man of God. But she was so overwhelmed. She was so full of fear and insecurity and hopelessness, and she couldn't hear the voice of God anymore. And that has been the case with a lot of believers. And God is speaking. God always speaks. God always tells you, do this or don't do that. God always tells you, go here or stay here. God always tells you, speak or be silent. But have we turned a deaf ear to the voice of God? Look at John chapter 10. And from verse 1 to 6, most assuredly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. He entered by the door. That's Jesus. He says, but he who enters by the door. Entering by the door really means, he was born of a woman. He came in to the earth the right way. He didn't come in through anybody's body. He says, look, he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him, the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice. And he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, that's a perfect picture of shepherding. He brings out his own sheep. He goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. That is the confidence of Jesus concerning you, child of God. His sheep hear his voice. His sheep follow him, and he leads them out. Glory be to God. So you see, in the time of famine, we must resist the temptation, like this woman, resist the temptation to turn deaf ears to the voice of God, because God will always speak to you, child of God. But the question is, are you listening and are you hearing what he's saying to you? Look at the next stimuli in the time of famine. Again, still 1 Kings 17 and verse 9. Okay, let's do verse 10. From somewhere in verse 10, he says, he called to her and said, please bring me a little water in a cup that I may drink. That looked like seed she could give. So she was going to get it, verse 11 says. Then he upped it and he said, please bring me a morsel of bread. And it's like she drew the line and said, man of God, you've gone too far. I mean, little water in a cup, I could have given you that. Now you're asking for a morsel of bread. I mean, all you pastors, you don't know when to stop. All you pastors, you know how to make demands on people. And after you say it's God that is collecting the money, what do you mean, a morsel of... Do you know what happened? Stimuli number 5. In the time of famine, your seed becomes threatened. And it's not because anybody is taking it out of your hand. It's because you are keeping it. As my pastor used to say, it's like you're taking the thing, you are putting it in a can, you seal the can, and you sit on the can, and you say, move me if you can. No. It's you that is holding on to your seed. Because in the time of famine, seed becomes threatened. This woman was ready to give a cup of water. And then the man of God dared to ask her to give a morsel of bread. You know what he was doing what God was doing through him? He was making a demand on her faith. And sometimes God will do that to you in a time of famine. He will make a demand on your faith. But when your seed is threatened, you will not let go of that seed. This woman was ready to eat her seed and die. That's all she saw in front of her, death. And she was ready to do it because her seed was threatened. All she saw was this little morsel of bread, this little flour she had to make a cake for herself and her son, and they will eat it and die. Nobody's going to take this from me. My seed is threatened. In the time of famine, you find people converting their seed into bread. When you convert your seed into bread, there is no future for you. When you convert your seed into bread, you are signing off your death sentence, really, and submitting to the pressure of the time of famine. In the time of famine, your seed is threatened. Your stomach will challenge you for your seed. Your stomach would say, let me just eat this, even if it's the last meal we have. Why don't you turn it around and you say, like, if this is not going to help me, I might as well sow it. But in the time of famine, your seed is threatened. And like I said last week, her miracle was in front of her in Elijah. The man of God was sent by God, and God told her, God commanded her. She heard him, but her seed was threatened. Child of God, is your seed threatened? Are your tithes threatened? Because your stomach needs to pay school fees, because your stomach needs to eat. These are legitimate, valid needs. Don't get me wrong. It is legitimate to pay your school fees. It is legitimate to pay your rent. It is legitimate to want to invest in your company. These are legitimate needs. But is there anything more legitimate than obeying the voice of God? Is there anything more legitimate than doing what God will have you do, or listening to the voice of God and hearing what he will have you do? And the man of God didn't just say, I want your water and I want your morsel of bread. And then she now said, I want to make a cake for myself. And he said, make for me first. He put a demand on her faith. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead and make that thing you want to make. But make for me first. There was a hungry boy in the picture. But God said, make for me first. Have your tithes been threatened, child of God, because of the famine situation? Have you used the economic crisis to explain why you don't give? You don't sow your seed, you don't even pay your tithe anymore? In the time of famine, the stimuli that comes against you is that your seed becomes threatened. And when you find yourself in that situation, let me show you the next thing that begins to happen to you, and that's really becomes a sad, desperate situation. Look at the next thing, and let's look at another story now. Let's look at Genesis 47. Like I said, so many, if you can say exciting, I don't know if stories of famine are exciting, but they're exciting because there are truths in it that show how God led the people out of famine. So there are many exciting stories about famine and hunger that you can find in the scriptures that will show you how you can actually find your way out and recognize the stimuli that come from such situations. Look at Genesis 47. And I'll just read 3 verses from 13 to 15. Now there was no bread in all the land. Does that sound like a bad situation? We read about a great famine in Samaria. We read about no dew, no rain with Elijah. This is another bad situation. It says, there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe. So that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan languished, like somebody on a sick bed, on a dying bed, languished because of the famine. So you are not in any doubt from verse 13 as to how bad the situation is. Verse 14, and Joseph gathered up all the money. He gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. I mean, that should have been a sense of reassurance. The money was now in Pharaoh's house. But look at verse 15. So when the money failed, I love this. When the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread. Give us bread, though. Let me add it. Let me put the O like a Nigerian. You would speak. Give us bread, though. For why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed. That is another stimuli you see in the time of famine. In the time of famine, money fails you. In the time of famine, money fails you. And I'm sure if I'm to tap some people and say, what is the way out of this problem in our nation? What is the way out of this problem in your country? What is the way out of the problem in Europe and different places where there are economic situations going on? We just need more money. If we could just have more money. Have you heard people who want to start businesses say, my problem is just capital. If I can just get money. Listen to me, child of God. In the time of famine, money fails you. Money is not what you are looking for. Really, if you have the blessing, you have all that you need. And the blessing will generate money when you need it. But money fails you. Money has so failed us in this nation, and money has failed so many other nations. Look back to 10 years ago, how much the exchange rate was. Look back to how much you could buy with the same amount of money you have in your hands today. Listen to me and listen to me again, child of God. In the time of famine, money will fail you. And if you put your affection, you set your heart on money, you set your affection on money being the solution, you will be so disappointed. So when your seed becomes threatened, there's no future for you. And the money that you have been holding on to, the money you are holding on to now begins to show you that It has no strength. Money is just a tool that God expects you to use to fulfill the work of the kingdom. And money is supposed to be something you possess. But unfortunately, money possesses a lot of us. And this is money that fails you. In the time of famine, money fails you. Look at 1 Timothy 6 and verse 10. It says the love of money. Because I might be saying this, money fails you. And someone says, yes, that's why I don't like money. Yes, that's why it's good to be poor. No, that's not what I'm saying. It says the love of money is the root of all evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. See where the problem? The problem is not the money. The problem is the affection, the attention, the hope you put on money, making money the solution. When money says, I can't help you, I can be used by you if God puts me in your hand and shows you what to do with me. But you can't rely on me as your solution, because money in itself will fail you. Look at the easy to read version of that same 1 Timothy 6, easy to read version. It says, for the love of money, listen please, the love of money causes all kinds of evil. Forget about that part. The part I want you to see is the next part. Some people have turned away from what we believe because they want to get more and more money, but they have caused themselves a lot of pain and sorrow. The old rat race, the old buying and selling rat race. This is the way to go. If I can just get this, I will get this. I will sit on it. I will hold on to it. I won't sow my seed. I won't be gracious to anybody. I won't give anybody anything. It's all about my calculations. I'm always on my calculator like an accountant. It's always about my numbers. Money fails you in the time of famine. Money fails you in the time of famine. Money fails you in the time of famine. A young girl recently gave a testimony of how she got 2 scholarships to go to school abroad. And she made a statement in that testimony that blessed me. She said, the exchange rate went up, but my school fees went down. That's when your hope is not on money. Her hope was on her covenant. Her hope was on the blessing. Her hope was on the favor of God. And though the exchange rate was going up, and therefore her school fees were going to cost her parents more in naira because the exchange rate was going up and they were not getting any help from the banks or from the government, she looked unto God and she got the favor of God. She got the blessing of God activated. And money was failing other people and the exchange rate was going up, but her school fees went down. Child of God, you must recognize the stimuli that in the time of famine, money fails you. And you can't set your affections, you can't set your hope, you can't make money. If I can only get more and more and more and more money, money could just be useless if you don't have it set right or put right within the right context with God. Glory be to God. And then what happens when money begins to fail you? What happens? Oh, my time is almost gone. Look at what happens. You know, you begin to get into the credit system, the borrowing system, and it leads to a really bad situation. And I want to read this again from Genesis 47. I started from 13 to 15. Now I want to read 16 to 20. Then Joseph said, after they had come and said, the money has failed, what was Joseph's answer? Joseph said, give your livestock. He is the leader. He is doing what he needs to do. And the people were the ones who were desperate. They were facing the famine. He said, give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone. Livestock was their property, but they had to surrender their livestock. So they brought their livestock to Joseph. And Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. Now that should have solved the problem, right? No. This is the next point before I continue reading. In the time of famine, there is progressive slavery that eventually leads to death, really. There is progressive slavery. Look at verse 18. When that year had ended, they came to him the next year. You see, they had become dependent. Some of us have become dependent on the banks, on the borrowing system, on debt, on everything, because money has failed and because our seed have been threatened. And so they came to him the next year and said to him, we will not hide from my Lord that our money is gone. My Lord also has our herds of livestock. Collateral had been locked up. They had nothing. There is nothing left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land. Buy us. They came and said, buy us. Because all they could see was the famine. Progressive slavery. Money had gone. Money had failed them. Seed had been threatened. They said, buy us. How can you say, buy us and our land for bread? And for bread, the same bread that we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. This is so sad. Give us seed that we may live and not die, and the land may not be desolate. Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For every man of the Egyptians sold his field, because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. When your seed is threatened, when money fails you, you get into progressive slavery. And at the end of the day, it's really just death that is before you. Child of God, the time of famine is a desperate time. The time of famine is a time of despair. If you do not know how to activate abundance and resist these 7 stimuli we have seen that hit you in the time of famine. And from next week, we're going to begin to see how you can actually activate God's great and divine abundance. And you may be physically located in a situation where there's an economic crisis, but you can live under another economic system and enjoy abundance and help others too with abundance in the time of famine. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father, for the liberation that is coming with this message. Thank you because our eyes are open to hear you and to do what you tell us, and we'll be able to activate abundance like you desire for us in the time of famine. We give you all of the praise, Lord. All of the glory belongs to you in the name of Jesus.
Here's how to join the Fresh Dew Partnership Circle. Go to freshdew.tv, register, and that's it. You become a partner. Financial partners can give online by clicking the Give to Fresh Dew link on the homepage or call 0700 Fresh Dew for more details.